Hello and welcome to the TMZ podcast. I'm Charlie Cotton. Today I'm joined by Derek Kaufman, and what a terrible morning for news. Liam Payne, One Direction star, fell from a balcony in Argentina. He was just 31, and my God, ain't this like the most tragic thing you've heard in a long time?
It's unbelievable. This story broke in our newsroom in the afternoon, and the details have been coming to light ever since. We knew that he passed away yesterday from that fall, but now we have gotten the 911 audio from the moments surrounding the incident. Shortly before he fell to his death, a hotel manager reportedly called 911 and reported that there was a guest who was at the hotel who was overwhelmed with drugs and alcohol. That was the way it was described. He was smashing up the hotel room and they needed assistance. So this was an emergency type call. The operator questioned the claim about drugs and alcohol being involved, but the manager seems to insist that there are drugs and alcohol. This guest is out of control and we need help and assistance here. Then expressed concern that the guest's life was at risk, noting that the individual had been staying in the room for 2 to 3 days. This is Liam, who they're talking about, and mentioned that the hotel balcony was a concern. So you can imagine that maybe the scenario is playing out and he's threatening perhaps jumping from the hotel balcony. So a very, very serious sort of frenetic call in these final moments. And by the time the cops arrive, Liam had fallen or jumped to his death from that third floor room. It was about 40 to 45 feet high, and he perished from the injuries that he sustained during that fall. We're getting a picture that's starting to be painted, right, Charlie? Like, we've heard that witnesses in the lobby beforehand saw him behaving erratically, smashing a laptop, maybe having to be escorted up to his room because he was causing a scene in the public lobby, carried up, escorted up. In any event, he was not in the right headspace in the moments before his death. This seems to lend credibility to the idea that this was an impulsive act rather than something that was considered for a long time, which suggests that drugs and alcohol may have been involved. He battled these demons.
Right. I mean, yeah, he did battle these demons publicly for years. And he had, friends and family and girlfriends and ex-girlfriends talking about their concern for the pop star who had obviously was going down a path. And he himself, would talk about death and just just existential type, like he didn't think he was going to be around forever, apparently. And so
he was really a tormented artist, right? And he had discussed openly, as you said, I think he described them as severe suicidal thoughts. At a point in time, he had done a stint in rehab where he had maybe straightened out for a period of time. But this was a constant struggle for Liam. He was also one of the principal songwriters for One Direction. And sometimes artists, their greatness comes from this kind of torment and turmoil, and that's where the creativity is drawn from. So you can imagine this sort of tortured artist writing these lyrics and just sort of wrestling with a lot of issues that he was able to, channel into art. And sometimes it gets the better of you.
So the cops arrive, having responded to a call about Liam being aggressive, and they arrive at the hotel and it's too late. He's already dead. What happens from there? They go and they see that they can't revive him. People at the hotel, I imagine, are shocked. What happens around the scene, when this happens?
Yeah, look, Buenos Aires is a developed part of the world. I mean, they have the same or similar protocols that we have in the United States. First responders will come. There have been photos of setting up a perimeter around what is the scene of the event. They obviously cover up the body down there, but there's a lot of hotel guests, and there's going to be lurid pictures and witness accounts of this because it was done in such a public setting. Buenos Aires is a huge city. There was nothing they could do to revive him, apparently, from the injuries that he sustained from the fall. Maybe serious blunt force trauma, head injuries, things of that nature. His death was likely swift, and there was nothing that they could do. And now there will be an investigation. I mean, they have to do an investigation. We'll hear more details come out from the police and so forth, so they can determine the cause of death. Because as you said, a fall, a jump, they're treating it as an apparent suicide at this point. That's what all of the evidence to this point shows. No foul play or anything of that nature. But it does remain to be seen. You have to sort of continue to follow this story, and that's why I think the coverage will be important to sort of keep up with.
So he was over in Argentina with his girlfriend, Kate Cassidy, who had left Buenos Aires just a couple days prior. She was kind of over the trip. She had been there for longer than she had intended. They were over there to support Niall, obviously, who was playing a gig. And actually, it kind of went a little bit viral, Liam at Niall's gig, because he seemed to be having like a pretty good time. He was leading the whole crowd in the Macarena.
Yeah.
Security had to come over and like stop him because apparently he was like, having too much of a good time.
And to your point, there had been a little friction with the band. He had spoken critically of them in previous months, and when he would go on podcasts and so forth, his experience, he struggled with that. So it was a nice moment, right? He was at Niall's concert. It seemed like a lot of the band members were reuniting around, sort of Niall's solo work. And so he wasn't reclusive. I think we're going to get a lot of details because this guy was a social media presence, and Kate Cassidy is an influencer herself.
Right.
So they posted a lot. You can see a video of them just days before in Argentina saying, I'm going to go play polo today. Here we are at breakfast. One of those people who like chronicled their lives very closely. It's not exciting video, but it's just a day in the life of Liam. And he didn't seem sad. He's looking at art pieces. He's sort of seems to be in an okay headspace. He doesn't seem to be slurring or on drugs in these videos, but you just don't know. You're getting a very sort of curated version of a person when you see their social media content most of the time.
The weird thing about this news when it came out yesterday was we were hearing that Liam Payne may have died, but then you went to his Snapchat and he had posted like 30 minutes earlier. And so you're going, hang on a second. And the stuff that he had posted was of his current girlfriend, of like a really nice breakfast. Like clearly he wasn't sort of like planning anything, or he was in like a publicly dark place.
Right.
Clearly depression takes many different forms. And when you see video and pictures of Liam in his final days, that's not a guy you would, guess just by looking at it, that guy's seriously depressed. He was interacting so nicely with fans. Like when I see these videos outside the hotel, on that day or the day before, when he's giving these Argentinian fans so much of his time and love and hugging and, wrapping his arms around them, singing to them, speaking Spanish to them, like just being, clearly this guy wasn't thinking like, okay, these are my final days. He was, he was probably doing drugs. He was probably by himself, because his girlfriend had just left. He was probably going through something pretty serious with his ex-fiancée, Maya Henry. And I think that is a big sort of point to all this. Him and Maya Henry, his ex, had a lot of issues together.
Yeah, there was turmoil in his personal life. I'm hesitant to speculate as to what headspace he was in or what role, his issues with Maya played. There was some friction. They had a somewhat messy breakup. That was his fiance. There were some lawyers getting involved about whether or not he was contacting her too much, and her sort of discomfort with that.
Didn't she send him a cease and desist like a week or so ago?
That was the report, that her lawyers were saying sort of back off, and maybe he was not handling that situation particularly well. But to your point, yeah, outward appearances are one thing, and sometimes suicide can be an impulsive act. It can be something that comes spur of the moment. I remember when we covered Robin Williams, there were pictures from the days before he was in an art museum. He was, and everyone likes to say, oh, what was his body language, this and that. It probably wasn't indicative of a man who was about to end his life, and then he ended his life. And if that is the case here with Liam, and as we said, we're not confirmed on that, but it does look like an apparent suicide, it could have been an impulsive act. And that call from the hotel manager suggests that these last moments were chaotic. And sometimes you don't behave in ways that are predictable. And it's just extremely sad. This was a 31-year-old kid, very, very talented, though, his whole life in front of him, and it ended yesterday.
It might have been an impulsive act, but, clearly he had demons for a long time. And what I think people are going to be picking apart, rightly or wrongly, is a lot of what Maya Henry has said to, on podcasts, on her own social media. She was, talking very, she was giving a lot of details about Liam that maybe he wouldn't want out there. She had just released a book that was a fiction, but it was a fiction because she says it was based on a true story. She changed the names, she changed the places, and it was about, a pop star who went from clean cut to drug addicted, and some of the stuff she says in her story, or I don't know, shocking. And she also talks
And the
about
fiction is thinly veiled. They were a known couple, so he could have felt like everyone's going to know it's me.
Right.
The walls are closing in on me, and that can be an overwhelming feeling for a young person.
And she talks about how he didn't want the book to come out, and he also, all of these just things in his private life were starting to come out more and more, especially with the cease and desist. God knows what else is going to happen. She talks about how he would raise death to her as almost at the time, and the time was only a few days ago. She said she thought it was a manipulation tactic, which I think is quite understandable. She took that he was saying I'm going to die soon to her as so that he would get something out of her, or that he would just control her more. And I think I really do understand her having that reaction at the time. Looking back on it now, maybe he was really trying to tell you something, but I don't think a lot of the internet, I think, is unfairly coming for Maya.
We have to be careful how we talk
Yes.
about this. She's going to wrestle with a lot of emotion. She knew him very well. This was someone she was engaged to be married with. Even if they had a messy breakup at one point, they loved each other very deeply by all accounts. And so, assigning blame and all of these things, which the internet is quick to do, and
Right.
I'm sure she will be going through it, is just awful. It really is. For her to endure that in the midst of this, people end their lives for various reasons, but, blaming another person, there's a lot going on in a person's head.
Oh,
and so I think that's pretty reckless, and, we shouldn't engage in it, and we don't, but it is out there. This is the way this story is going to be reported. This is the way media, and so people are going to have access to this, and I think it's responsible to sort of always contextualize that he just had a very complicated life. He really did.
Right. And a really sad part of it is just he leaves behind a son, Bear, who's 7 years old. He had with Cheryl Cole, who's also a famous singer over in England. And I mean, as every dad does, I mean, he loved that kid. He talked about how much his favorite thing in the world was driving that kid to school and dropping him off. And it's just...
Yeah, we're both parents. We can really relate to that element of it. You have a young kid, and it adds to the tragedy here for sure.
And a lot of sort of celebrities and famous people in general are coming out and reacting to this. Simon Cowell, who was obviously responsible for putting One Direction together in the first place.
I mean, he was the paternal figure behind the band. They started on X Factor.
Right.
He assembled them together to become this mega sensation. And they really were in the 2010s. No one was bigger than One Direction. They've canceled his taping of Britain's Got Talent, another show where he tries to spot the next big talent. I mean, this is Simon Cowell's thing. And I imagine he sees these kids sort of as his like surrogate children, right?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we've heard from Ty Dolla $ign, Charlie Puth, Paris Hilton, Zed, Juicy J, Shawn Mendes, Joe Exotic has weighed in. But
all of the comments, though, are loving sort of remembrances of Liam, because what happens, regardless of how things end, you strip away sort of the negativity, and there's just sort of all that's left is sort of fondness at this juncture. So it's a very, very sad story. We should go to some comments. I mean, people are reacting to this story. So
yeah, so I mean, we've been going live and people have been leaving their comments about Liam Payne today. Ms. Courtney Renee talks about how mental health matters. And yeah, it's going
to be a big issue going forward. This is going to bring that into sharp relief, right?
Yeah.
People are going to think about drugs, alcohol, and mental health and that whole issue for a period of time as they process this.
MM talks about how these must have been really terrible final moments for Liam Payne. I mean, you got that podcast Last Days. This is his last day. Seemed like it was, a bit torturous.
Terrible. I mean, that comment says it all in 3 words. When you hear that 911 call, it's impossible to think of this as anything other than awful.
And finally, Tanya Dolphy says, we never know what is on a person's mind when they do something. We can't judge anyone. Very true. I mean, looking at the final videos of him in Argentina, at his hotel, smiling, interacting, singing, being like the celebrity that fans want. If you run into your favorite celebrity, you want them to be like Liam Payne outside that hotel. Like, he was so lovely.
Yeah.
And for him to be going through something so dark, probably, using drugs potentially around that time.
The age really strikes me as I become sort of the elder statesman here. I think, man, if I could just be there and pull him aside and say, you're 31. This is the prime of life. This is like supposed to be the decade where you've got success a little bit. You have a little money in your pocket. Everything is in front of you. You're not sort of figuring yourself out as much. And to end at that stage is nothing short of tragic.
Yeah, I mean, really, really shocking stuff. Well, thanks for coming on the pod.
Yep.
Talking to me about it. And thank you guys for listening live and on YouTube. We appreciate you, and we'll speak to you tomorrow. Goodbye.